Luke, just testing. Can you hear us okay? And how does it sound on the live stream? Good morning. Can you hear me okay? How does it sound on the live stream? The volume in the room is good. Luke is typing to tell me that he doesn't hear anything. Okay. Katrina, can you hear us? How are you? Um, okay. Katrina, can you just double check and let James know? I'm talking, but it just went off. I was speaking like this, and then it just cut off. Look at now. See what sounds like on the thing. Okay. James, what is that? Oh, Emma, what is that piece of paper next to you? Is that the agenda? Do you mind giving that to me? Can you admit them there? Good morning, Steve. Can you hear us okay? Good morning, Steve. Can you hear us okay? Katrina, can you still hear us okay online?
I can hear you, Derek here.
Fab, thank you, Derek. Steve, can you hear us okay?
I don't think Steve might have muted, might be muted. I got that impression.
Good morning, Emma. How are you? Just testing the audio. Yeah. Yeah, I've turned mine down a little bit. Detailed planning permission, refurbished of hotel to service apartments with ground floor event space and cinema room. No, I didn't cut out that time.
Hello, this should just be, it should almost sound like you're standing next to me, not sounding like it's coming through speakers. Is that what's happening, or does it still sound like it's slightly amplified? Just turn it down a little bit more. Yeah. Nobody would say that. Nobody could possibly say that. Fiona, can you hear me okay from there? Is that a nice level of volume when it's quiet in here? Sorry, is that okay? Can everybody hear me properly? It's meant to just lift it enough so it would be almost like we're talking this way. It's not meant to amplify it massively, because that's... so what's that meant to mean? Are you... What?
I mean that my hearing is better than some others.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Can we maybe get the... So what Lauren is saying is, shall we get the old age home in to just double check the mics? And I'm not losing. So the mic is there, and I think I'm feeding through the microphones okay.
Sorry, that seems like a nice level, but obviously there wouldn't be this much noise in the room when the meeting... Okay, so is that sort of an acceptable level of volume? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously I could move it a bit closer, and, you know, there's also going to be a bit of adjustment for people using the mics. Yeah.
I think we need somebody that's a bit quieter to check their mics. Emma?
Hello. That sound okay?
Go to the far end and there's one.
It's not also Lauren.
Can you hear me? All good? Yeah? Yeah?
Hello? Yeah, so it shouldn't really sound much different from me talking directly to you. Because otherwise yeah. And you should be able to sit and talk normally, and everybody should be able to hear you as if you're sitting there rather than it booming through the speakers like at a concert.
Okay, Luke, so are we saying these mics are good? Live stream is perfect? And you can hear me? Yes?
We'll go and check the live stream now.
Okay, you go and do that.
With the levels in the room, then
yeah,
we'll adjust the levels.
I think within the room it's fine and the mics aren't dropping off. Yeah. Good morning, Anne. Good morning, Chris. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Can you hear
Yes,
me
I-
okay?
Yes, I can, Chris.
Smashing.
Good morning. I can hear you too. Thank you.
Good morning, Anne. We can hear you. Thank you.
Morning, Hannah. Just checking you can hear us okay.
Morning. Yep. Hi, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you. Morning, Doug. Just making sure you can hear us okay.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September Cairngorm National Park Authority Planning Committee meeting. For those members of the public joining us today, either virtually or in person, I'm Gaynor Roger, the convener of the Planning Committee. Today's meeting will also be live streamed on the Cairngorm's YouTube channel. Before we go any further with the meeting, I'm going to ask James to run a roll call, please.
Chris Beattie,
Here, good morning.
Sandy Bremner,
Here.
Peter Cosgrove,
Here.
Penny Deans, Paul Gibb,
Here.
Hannah Grist,
Here.
Russell Jones,
Here.
Bill Lobbin,
Present.
Steve Nickelwright,
I'm here.
Lauren McCallum,
Here.
Eleanor McIntosh,
Morning.
Douglas McAdam,
Good morning. Present.
Xander McDade,
Present.
Fiona McLean,
Morning.
Gaynor Roger,
Here, thank you.
Anne Ross
Good morning.
and Derek Ross.
Here, good morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. So we've got apologies from Jiva and John, I think.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. So members, to help move business forward effectively this morning, please can you keep your questions succinct and to the point, focused firmly on clarification of technical or planning issues. Once we've moved into the discussion phase of an application, it would be helpful if members could indicate at an appropriate point if you're minded to put forward any proposal regarding the officer's recommendations. This is a hybrid meeting, so for members in the room, you can raise your real hand to indicate that you want to speak, and for those joining us online, please raise your virtual hand, and I can see that on my screen in front of me. For those joining us virtually, can you also please make sure your microphones are muted unless you're speaking to reduce the feedback? Thank you. Should a member wish to pull together an amendment to the motion of any of the items today, a breakout room is available and you'll be joined there by Peter Ferguson. James, just to check, the breakout room for those virtually is accessible from where? Okay, if we could just check that, that would be good. So if anyone wants to join the breakout room virtually, we'll get that set up for you. Thank you. So we've got apologies from Jiva and John. I'll now ask if there are any declarations of interest that members wish to declare on any items on the agenda today. If you do, can you please be clear on the item number, the nature of your declaration, and whether you'll take part or leave? Thank you. I've got Sandy first, please.
Yeah, in terms of item 5, in the interest of transparency, I'm chair of the conservation charity, the Brundy Trust, which received a charitable donation from the applicant. So I'll be leading the meeting during that item.
Thank you. Members, any other declarations of interest for today? I don't see any hand in the room and I don't have any virtually, so thank you. So I'll move on to item number 4, that's the minutes of the previous meeting on the 11th of August and matters arising not covered elsewhere. Committee members, you've got the minutes there in your board pack. Can I ask if you're content with the accuracy of the minutes, and that's pages 1 to 10 in the planning committee minute, and that's the public meeting minute. I don't have any hands up, so I'm guessing then that committee is happy then to approve these minutes. Thank you. Under matters arising, there's nothing to update from myself, but I'm going to hand over to Gavin. I think we've got a few things to update committee on. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much. Yes, you'll remember that there was a claim that the Bedouish facility was in breach of their recreation management plan and were allowing dogs and encouraging dogs onto the site. So we've spoken with the operators. They've now removed the information on their website that said dogs were welcome on site, and we're continuing with discussions on other things. There are some operational difficulties they may have, so we're going to discuss that with them, and then we'll come back and explain anything else to the board. But in the first instance, the advertising of the site that is friendly to people with dogs, that's been removed from the site, so they'll no longer have that, and they will be not I suppose, publicising that dogs can go there, and they will be letting people bring dogs to the site. However, there are some other parts to that which will be difficult to implement immediately because there are dogs entering that site from a number of locations. Dogs that are accompanied with people entering that site from a number of locations.
Thank you, Gavin. Do we have any other members that wish to raise anything in terms of matters arising? No, thank you. Members, also just to point out, I'll move a motion to take the minutes from our confidential session from the 11th of August at the end of this public session. Is everyone happy with that? Yep, thank you. Okay, so the first item on today's agenda, so I think Sandy, you're going to leave. Thank you. We'll call you back in when we're finished. So this relates to two applications, one for detailed planning permission for the refurbishment of the Invercold Arms Hotel in Braemar and associated works, and the second for listed building consent for the refurbishment. And I'm going to hand over to Emma to take us through the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning, members. Okay, so the application site is located to the northeast corner of Braemar and is bound by agricultural land to the north and east and to the south by Castleton Place and to the west by A93. The application site is the existing Category C listed Invercold Hotel and its ancillary dairy and mews buildings, which are also Category C listed. The Category B listed Omnibus House is also part of the development proposals. The hotel is a typical Scots baronial building, which has been extended in the past, both sympathetically and less so more recently. The dairy is currently in a dilapidated state, but the mews has recently been refurbished and is in part in use as a village pub and staff accommodation for the applicant's other business. The east wing of the mews is under separate ownership. That's this. The site is accessed off the A93 Glenshee Road to the north. There's also access off Castleton Place to the south. The application site also includes a small area of land opposite the hotel across the A93, which is used as an informal car park. And that's this area here. So an application for full planning permission and a listed building consent application have been submitted for the refurbishment and restoration of the Invercold Hotel and its ancillary buildings. Full planning permission is also sought for the construction of a new leisure facility and the redevelopment and upgrading of the wider site, including a replacement bridge over Cluny Water. The building will be restored and refurbished to provide short-term let serviced apartments, a ground floor event space here in the former castle room in the north wing, and a cinema room in this area here, which was in a room formerly known as the Colonel's Bed. It's proposed to retain as many original features as possible internally, and where required, reintroduce traditional materials that have been lost in the past. A new entrance canopy will be constructed in a recess between the original building and a slightly later extension, which will provide a secondary separate entrance to the event space. Works will include the removal of unsympathetic extensions and the addition of respectful infill elements, principally to the rear, the replacement of all UPVC windows with timber sash encased windows, and the repair or exact replacement of the building's architectural features, slate roofs, slate roof areas, leadwork masonry and ironworks. The rear elevation of the hotel will address the reinstated courtyard and will provide the hotel with a secondary public interface. This is an image of what the rear elevation will look like, with the access into the hotel area and an open area for public to use and landscaping. Ancillary buildings, once renovated, the dairy will provide accommodation for staff. Existing stonework will be used at ground floor level and timber cladding at second floor level, with the roof clad in natural slate. This is a visualisation of what the dairy building will look like. Ancillary buildings, housing plant and generators will be located adjacent to the renovated dairy buildings. And examples of these are here. The south wing of the Mews building will provide two artist studios and a workshop facilities. The north wing will be retained as existing with some minor remedial works. Works to the Category B listed Omnibus House will involve minor amendments to the internal layout and reinstating original finishes both internally and externally. This will provide office space for the business. So the new leisure building will accommodate a swimming pool, a gym, a yoga studio and ancillary space. This is a visualisation from the internal courtyard of what it will look like. The building will be a single storey and of a contemporary design, predominantly finished in timber. The building will have a flat green roof. The proposals will include a landscaping scheme incorporating pedestrian and vehicular circulation across the site, Existing hard and soft landscaping to the north, south and west of the site will be retained where appropriate and upgraded as necessary. Another visualisation of the building and of the dairy in the background. The replacement bridge, this is an image of what it will look like. This is the type of bridge that's being proposed. So this is the bridge that they're proposing across the Cluny Water. It's a simple design, and this will provide safer access from to the core path. Given the constraints of the site, the bridge will be a footbridge for pedestrians only. The next slide is just to give members a look around the site basically as it is. This is front elevation of the hotel. This is the Mews that's been upgraded and used as a pub, and this is the back of the hotel, and this space here is where the new leisure building will go, just up in that gap there. This is the north facing elevation of the Mews building. That's not too much going on there. That's been renovated and just be some remedial works undertaken there. This is within the internal courtyard of the Mews building, the opposite the elevation the other side of that. So that, again, not too much going on there, but looking back out onto the area where the new leisure building will be. Internal courtyard of the Mews building, just showing the south part of the south elevation, which will form the artists' workspace, and this is the area that's in separate ownership. Back into the rear courtyard, and this, to the background, you can see the dilapidated dairy building. Just another image of the dairy building with the view south, and then looking west towards the back of the hotel and the dilapidated dairy building. And then quite prominent elevation. This is on the approach from the north into Braemar, and you can see the north-facing elevation of the existing hotel and the Mews building, and this is the area where the new leisure building will be. So, in terms of the material considerations, in terms of principle, the proposal will bring the hotel and its ancillary buildings back into sustainable uses, providing facilities which will benefit both the tourist industry and the local community. The design ethos of the proposed development will sympathetically rejuvenate the redundant site and its listed buildings. Original features will be retained where possible, and where replacements are necessary, these will replicate the originals. Unsympathetic extensions and detailing will be replaced by more traditional elements, and new additions will be designed to be in keeping with the more traditional character of the site to ensure these harmonise with their context. The proposed landscaping scheme, which includes the creation of new publicly accessible green spaces, will introduce many positive effects within the local landscape. Concern has been raised regarding the impact the new leisure building will have on the prominent view of the site on the approach to Braemar from the north. Although the new building will be single-storey and have a low horizontal form, it is markedly different from the buildings within the area. It's considered that additional tree planting along that northern boundary will introduce more vertical elements and help alleviate this impact, and therefore a condition is recommended to include additional landscape mitigation measures along that boundary. The large healthy elm tree at the site junction with the A93 is covered by a tree preservation order, and its protection and retention is essential. Conditions for a robust commitment to protect the tree are therefore recommended. In terms of environmental impacts, the site has been surveyed for bats, and subject to the required Nature Scot licence, a bat protection plan and bat box is being provided on the site. There will be no significant impacts on bats. Pre-construction surveys and, where required, species protection plans for red squirrel and otter are also required, and given the site's proximity to the River Dee SAC, pollution prevention measures will have to be put in place. In terms of access and servicing, the replacement bridge over the Cluny Water will improve access, as said, to the existing core path. However, because of the constraints of the site, it is just purely going to be a pedestrian footbridge, and there won't be any accessible provision because of the constraints there. And this has been discussed with the outdoor access officer at pre-application stage. The site's former use could potentially have left ground contamination, and a condition is recommended to ensure that any potential contaminants are identified and suitably addressed. So, to conclude, The proposed development will refurbish and return the redundant listed hotel and its ancillary buildings into long-term sustainable use. The proposed leisure building of contemporary design will complement this. The development will not harm either the character and appearance of the listed buildings nor their settings. The rejuvenation of this wider site will also be of benefit to the local community. So, subject to the recommended conditions, the proposed development is considered to comply with the policies contained within the National Planning Framework 4 and the adopted local development plan. It's recommended that committee approve the application subject to conditions listed in your papers. I would point out to committee that all the conditions that are listed in your papers will be included on the full planning permission, while only conditions 1, 2, 3, 11 and 13 will be included on the listed building consent, given that they relate only to the listed buildings and their setting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Committee members, we have Ben Addy from Moxon Architects who wishes to address the committee. So what I'll do is I'll take questions of clarification for Emma just now, and then we'll invite Ben forward to present to committee. So just now I'll take questions of clarification and any planning points raised rather than discussion for Emma. Thank you. Kenny.
Hi, just a question. The constraint around the bridge, I really don't understand. The width of the bridge is a constraint, or?
Members, any other questions or points of clarity for Emma? I don't have any hands in the room. I don't have any hands virtually either. Okay, thank you. Ben, would you like to take a seat at the front, please? Ben, you'll have 10 minutes to address committee, and then we'll see if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, committee, for the opportunity to speak, and thank you, Emma, for arranging for my slides to be shown on the screen. I've got 42 slides, so I'll try and be quick. Also, Emma actually has explained the scheme extremely well, so that I've got very little to add, but hopefully at the end of this presentation, I'll address a couple of your queries, including on the bridge and any other things that might have arisen through your discussions so far. Another brief introduction. There's Braemar. You can see the F is the Fife Arms, and the I is the Invercold Arms. The Fife Arms is owned and was redeveloped by the same applicant several years ago. It was completed in 2018. According to the Sunday Times, the Fife Arms doesn't so much beg a belief as a refurbishment as completely reinvent what a hotel can be. And I think it probably doesn't need much of an introduction. I think that everyone in the room is probably well aware of this building and its sort of ongoing success. The Invercold Arms, on the other hand, just beggars belief at the moment. It's an absolutely wonderful building, but over the course of the last century or so, it's sort of fallen progressively into a greater state of disrepair. Again, Emma has already kind of captured this with some of the drone photographs. These photographs are from several years ago now. We have done some work, remedial work to the roof. The dairy building in the background, which you can see is essentially a ruin in that photograph, has been made safe. The roof has been removed and the walls have been capped to prevent further deterioration. But really, the whole site is sort of crying out for this kind of redevelopment, this kind of refurbishment. Another view there from the east. This is the hotel in its heyday, or towards the end of its heyday. This is, I think, in the 1930s. As Emma mentioned, it's a sort of beautiful example of Victoriana, Highlands baronial, romantic architecture. It's an absolutely wonderful building from the exterior. The interior, on the other hand, has some challenges. I don't know how many people are aware of the insides of this building. It has some wonderful rooms. So the castle room, which Emma pointed out, which will be retained pretty much as is one of the most sort of extraordinary rooms in the whole village. It's an absolutely wonderful room. Meanwhile, the rest of the building sort of suffers from some of the same problems that the Five Farms did prior to the redevelopment, which is that you've got front of house and back of house clashing throughout the building. There's some decidedly unsafe spaces in this building in terms of fire escapes. In fact, there's one fire escape that springs to mind that I have to crawl through. The building really does need a sort of the kind of attention that this applicant is proposing to deliver to it. This is one of the George Washington Wilson photographs in the Aberdeen University collection from prior to the north wing of the building being built. And you can see the kind of the quality of the external masonry, but also the joinery, which Emma alluded to, all of which will be either replaced with exact matching joinery, or we're going to be replacing all 250 or so UPVC windows with brand new timber sash and case to match the exact framing patterns of the original, with details that we're agreeing with heritage officers. And I want to draw particular attention to this north elevation, because you can see that it has these wonderful barge boards and the kind of the finials and what have you on elevation. The north one, it's what we said, doesn't share the same sort of details. So our application includes incorporating these details at north. Sure. Thank you very much. There we go. Yeah, so the north elevation, we did in the application, we have asked for permission to add in the sort of barge boards and that kind of timber joinery detail. Presently, I think it's been removed from the application due to an objection from the Heritage Officer at Aberdeenshire Council. But we'd like to sort of put it on the record, I suppose, that we'd love to have them back in, and so are the applicants. We think that the argument for removing them is, well, we don't agree with the argument, and we think that it would add to the appearance of the building. It's such an important gateway to the village, and at the moment it's rather austere. Anyway, on to the rest of the scheme. In terms of the additions we're making to the exterior of the building, they're very much in keeping with the architecture of the back of the structure, the back of the building, using timber, slate, lead, traditional materials, granite. And you can see we're now up at first floor level, looking back towards the new building, which Emma mentioned, between two of our new extensions. Again, timber, slate, and lead. So here's the site plan as it currently stands, with the Invercold Arms on the road, and then the Mews and the dairy, as Emma's mentioned. And then here's the proposed site plan. So you can see we're adding, first of all, these buildings to the rear, which are sort of ancillary buildings. This isn't the current layout, but it's more or less correct. Ancillary buildings with back of house and electricity and power supplies. And then the main building that's being added is this what we call wellness building or leisure building in the centre of the site, which really just reinstates the footprint, albeit on a larger scale, of previously existing buildings on this site, essentially creating a courtyard that always used to be there, but has since disappeared. So there's our courtyard space in the middle here. You can see on this plan, actually, that the building has these kind of strong lines running across longitudinally. It is a flat roof, but it has a kind of almost like the shape of a run rig system. So you have a kind of a concertina ring in the roof. On the south edge, we have photovoltaics pointing south, and then on the north edge we have a kind of the kind of grassland and meadow mix. So from the surrounding hills to the north, so in particular Craigcoinnock, which is important to the village, you don't see the photovoltaics, but from the south you get the benefit of the additional power. So the wellness building is, in a sense, a power station as well as a swimming pool and a yoga studio and what have you. In terms of the architecture of the new building, we're very much taking the view that so from the north, the Invercourt Arms is the main event. And again, that's why the refurbishment of that elevation and hopefully the incorporation of barge boards is so important. And our new building is essentially like a garden wall. So we're taking the same materials from the Invercourt and then essentially building a wall garden that we then tuck our green roof building in behind. Using the same sorts of materials and details that you see in the area. Again, if you look at these old photographs, this is the bridge over the Garvolt before it was replaced by a cast iron structure. These kind of forms, timber lattices, timber diagrids, and this is exactly what we're doing with the new building. Sorry. So you can see these sorts of forms from pre-existing buildings in the area being incorporated into the new architecture. Cedar shingles, grass roof, like I say. These timber columns, we're probably actually going to be looking at exposed natural columns. So again, drawing on local influences. All sitting within a kind of naturalized landscape in the internal courtyard space. Again, it's drawing on entirely native cuneiforms species of flora being brought into the site.
That's, you just got 1 minute left, Ben.
Perfect. I'll skip through that. So I think there's been some points that have kind of come through in discussions. The BATs, which Emma's already dealt with, we've applied for the license. Staff accommodation, that's something we can come on if there are any particular questions on that. I'll just go through to one question on the bridge, which is the main constraint is on the west side of the bridge, where we're actually on someone else's land ownership. This is the existing bridge. You can see this kind of peculiar arrangement of steps. And the proposed bridge, we have space to put proper steps in that are correct heights by regulations, unlike the rather steep steps that you have at the moment. But otherwise, there is no room to provide a ramp at that side. So we're very much restricted by the space available. And I can go into the kind of the detail of that. As Emma mentioned, this was brought up at the application stage with August Stewart, the outdoor access officer, who agreed that we should proceed towards replacing the existing bridge on a like-for-like basis. We've actually improved upon it, but essentially it's the same user type as the existing bridge caters for. There's one of our bridges at Mount Keen, and that's more or less what it's going to look like. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Committee members, do you have any questions for any of the points that Ben's raised in his presentation today? I've got Eleanor first, please.
Hi, Ben. Could you just maybe tell us a wee bit more about the staff accommodation? How many you're looking to accommodate there, and is it Invercourt staff? Is it?
Sure. So we'll go right back to the beginning of this project and the brief for the project. It's service departments. So unlike the Five Arms, which is a sort of full-blown hotel, which has something like 46 rooms, the Invercourt is going to have, I think it's 23 service departments. So the staffing requirements are much less than for the Five Arms. In terms of the accommodation for the staff, I think Art Farm now have accommodation across Braemar, Crathy, Ballater. They've got spaces they've got 70 staff beds. That includes the 13 that are in this development already, so in the Muse building. The dairy will add a further 10. We've just signed, or rather Art Farm have just entered into a contract for the redevelopment of the Craig Yard in Ballater, which will add another 20 odd, I believe. Essentially, we're getting to the point where the 70 current spaces will increase to something like 90 or 100. And the staffing requirements for the Invercourt are much less than they are for the Five Arms anyway. I mean, Art Farm do have several other businesses in the area, so notably the fish restaurant in Ballater, but that doesn't really require the same level of staff accommodation. So it is a kind of a key part of their business is providing that accommodation, and like I say, the Craig Yard, which will have a big impact, is starting on site imminently.
Thank you, Ben. I've got Lauren next, please.
I was just on the same question around about the staff accommodation. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I think just with the leisure facilities, they do take a lot of extra manning in terms of safety and lifeguards. Do you think 10 one-bedroom apartments is enough to service that? Because I think that, I know with the larger development and with the 70 going up to 90 beds, I still think just with only 10, I'm not sure if that is sufficient enough. So I guess it's a bit of an open question.
Well, it'll be 23 staff beds on site.
23 staff beds.
Yeah, but I think that one shouldn't look at it as being those 23 specific to the Invercold Arms particularly. It's for the business as a whole. I mean, when the 5 farms completed, to get, well, we worked on several kind of HMO applications for the applicants to provide staff accommodation. I think we were talking about 90 or so members of staff for the 5. This is completely different at the Invercold. It's far, far less. And yeah, one shouldn't look at those at the Invercold and say, well, the 23 that we have are for the Invercold. They're not. It doesn't require that many people. It's more about providing flexibility for the business across everything that they're doing in the area. Emma's got my notes on the PowerPoint, so she has the numbers exactly. But I think it is something like 100 bed spaces for staff. They've also recently started their own sort of minibus shuttle service and stuff up and down Deeside, so I think that has made a difference.
Thank you, Ben. I've got Fiona next, please.
Thank you. You mentioned the castle room. I'd love to see it sometime because it sounds really impressive. But I noted in the application that the ceiling, the stunning ceiling in there will be retained, but it's going to be covered over, and I presume that's for acoustic reasons. And I just wondered, to me that's quite disappointing that it'll be unseen if this is such an impressive room. And I just wondered what the decision was not to retain it in its current form.
So, I mean, it is a wonderful room. It's of a scale that doesn't exist elsewhere in England. Well, maybe St Margaret's has a similar kind of scale in a way. I mean, the ceiling has some lovely details, but it will have some new bulkheads sort of strewn across it, carrying services. So it's not entirely original. And we do need to upgrade the acoustics in that ceiling because you've got guest rooms above it, and for it to function as a kind of usable public function space, you need to have acoustic separation in there. And I mean, it would be worthwhile having a look at it. It's a wonderful room, but I'd say that the quality of the ceiling isn't the thing that makes it wonderful. It's the scale of it and the outlook.
Thank you. I've got Paul next, please.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could also expand on the parking with 40 or so units, if they were fully occupied, and should any of the staff have cars as well, is there sufficient parking on site? And I understand at the moment some of the 5 farms parking is carried out at this site at the moment. Will that continue as well?
So again, Emma has the numbers on my PowerPoint, the 23 service departments, we've got 70 parking spaces, car parking spaces on the development as proposed, as well as cycle spaces, motorcycle spaces, etc. in addition. So those 70 spaces, so that was arrived at through discussion with Aberdeen Council Roads Department, who required 69 spaces. So we've just crept over that line. And in terms of there is a discussion about parking more widely in Braemar. That doesn't just involve our applicant. It's a much broader kind of strategic discussion, I'd say. But in terms of this development, it has the required number of spaces according to the Leeds Roads Department.
Thank you. Can I just, Kenny, are you happy with your response with regarding the question you had about the bridge?
I'm not happy, but obviously the constraint is the land is owned by somebody else. I think we want to be making things accessible, and even if that joins a piece of ground that's not accessible, it's part of a strategic going forward to make all access accessible to as many groups as possible. So I accept what's been said.
Eleanor?
Yeah, I just on that same point, Kenny. I mean, I think it's a good application, but if there was one thing that I was disappointed in, is the bridge. And I know that the great work that you've done around that area with bridges, and this one looks good, but the fact it's a core path and we're not able to give all ability kind of access levels, I think is really disappointing. And I'm not putting the blame at your door, but I just wondered, could you give any indication if you had any discussion with the other landowner, if they were willing to come and go with you on that?
So the other landowner is Mar Estate, and I mean we find they've been very constructive in terms of all discussions that we've had on the bridge and other matters. I mean, it's worthwhile noting that the path on the other side itself is not remotely accessible. The bridge is far more accessible than the path that it adjoins. So, and to make that footpath accessible would require quite extensive civil engineering. And our bridge, in any case, is an improvement on what's there at the moment. So, I mean, I share the basic principle that you're expressing, but I think it's just impossible.
Thank you, Ben. I don't have any other hands in the room, nor any virtually. So thank you for that. Emma, can I ask, is there anything that you want to comment on that Ben's spoken to committee about today? No? Thank you. Okay. So committee, the recommendation is to approve the application both for the detailed planning permission and for the building consent. So I'm going to move us into the discussion. Are there any points, comments that committee members want to put forward? Okay, I've got Fiona, Xander, then Bill. I'll take Fiona first, sorry.
Thank you. I just want to say that I welcome the sympathetic renovation of the ski listed and its ancillary buildings, which clearly not only preserves but appears to enhance the character of the building. And just to say, I'd like to see more applications like this coming forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Yeah, I agree. When you look at the pictures there and see all of those UPVC white windows, I'm so looking forward to being able to see something that looks much nicer, and that's just on a really small scale. Xander, I'll bring you in. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. I absolutely echo what Fiona's just said. I was in the Invercold not long before it was closed to the public, and it was very tired at that point. And the scale of the renovation that's been talked about is not cheap. I speak from well-worn experience personally in this sector, and it's a fantastic investment to the Cairngorms. I think the mix of accommodation in terms of bringing service departments, so it is not a Fife Arms again, it is something different, but it is a quality product that is being invested in and will bring a different type of asset. I think it is, as has been discussed, actually it won't require the same levels of staffing at all. It's a very different style of operation, so I am quite confident that, to be honest, the staff accommodation is manageable for what is being discussed in terms of operation. But I think this is, as Fiona says, something we want to see more of. Hopefully we can, all going well, turn this into a potential case study in parts about what a nice sympathetic restoration looks like, but very happy to support the recommendation to approve.
Thank you, Xander. Bill, next, please. Thank you.
I think overall this is a really excellent and sensitive redevelopment of the site. And it's good to see that the new leisure complex makes no attempt to be some form of pastiche of the old hotel. I think, whilst I'm quite confident with the number of staff accommodation available, I think we need to bear in mind that whilst you're talking about potentially an overall group development, that's not necessarily that this will be the same in perpetuity. So when we're looking at staff accommodation, I think we really need to look at them on an individual site basis and not take into consideration something that might be 10 miles away, on albeit being the same ownership. So I think that's one thing that we need to bear in mind.
Thank you, Bill. I've got Eleanor and then Chris. So Eleanor first, please.
No, I would just move that we go to accept the recommendation for approval. I just think it's a great investment for Braemar.
Thank you, Eleanor. I'll bring in Chris, please.
Yeah, very quickly. Just agree with Eleanor. I think we should move this. I think it's a really nice development. Very sympathetic. Good to see reusing old materials. Also the incorporation of renewable energy source, and the new facility for the people of Braemar. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you, Chris. So I think we've got lots of positive notes there from committee. Sorry, I've got Anne Ross. Anne, would you like to come in, please?
Yes, good morning. Just, I'm impressed with this development. I think it's really positive. And as Chris has said, it'll be of benefit to Braemar and the surrounding area. So I'm very happy with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. So yeah, I think lots of positive comments there from committee. It does look a truly amazing actually development, bringing back the building to its new self, but in a really sensitive way, looking back to the past. I do really like how the leisure centre doesn't stick out. Actually, I think that's a very sympathetic way that it's been put back into that landscape with the grass roof. So, committee, I think then that we unanimously have recommended to approve full planning permission for the refurbishment of the hotel to service apartments with ground floor event space and cinema room, erection of leisure facilities, change of use of dwelling house to offices, conversion of dairy building to staff accommodation, conversion of Muse to artist studio, replacing the existing footbridge and erection of associated ancillary buildings. And we've also moved to approve listed building consent for the refurbishment of the hotel to service apartments with ground floor event space and cinema rooms, all at the Invercalled Arms Hotel, subject to the conditions outlined in the paper. Committee, happy to approve that? Yep, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, and thank you, Ben, for taking the time to come to speak to committee today. Can we bring Sandy back in, please? Okay, committee members, just a point, when we're speaking into our microphones, we don't need to speak so close to them now as we used to, and hopefully that will cut out any interference and feedback. So we'll try that going forward. Committee members, we are looking at the second item on our agenda today, and that relates to an application for detailed planning permission for the change of use, alterations and associated works to form a new campsite at the Old Mart in Tomintoul.
Red. You can see that, and I should apologise for downgrading the A939 to a B939 on the paper. I feel very sorry for it. But you can see the A939 running along the left road, basically coming into Tomintoul from the Ballater side on the right-hand side photo. And then, as you're aware, there used to be a big shelter belt as you approached Tomintoul, which is then chopped down and it now has more native woodland planting in there at a younger age. So that sits between that road and the site. And then the site itself, you probably relatively few people have been to have seen it. It sits off the high street, off the square. And if you've been down Conglass Lane, you would have seen it, otherwise probably not. That's an aerial photograph of the site, so you can see that the entrance goes in beside what is a council depot to the immediate right of the entrance, and then there's some other sheds, other businesses further to the right of that, and then the site goes into where there are some business units that are sort of partially occupied. There's a bit of field on the right hand side and an old sort of croft plot running into the site, and then immediately behind those buildings excuse me, bit of ground that's been a little bit disturbed in the past, around the time when those business units were built, and then there's a few I think it's barrels down at the end of that plot. On the sort of northeast edge of the site, you can see there's a path come track running alongside that, which is part of a circular walk around Tomintoul, and that will be kept as the development progresses. And there's also trees along that field boundary as well down to the sort of northeast of the site. That's just showing the site in a slightly larger context, seeing where it fits into Tomintoul and the surrounding area. This is the proposed site layout. So, I mean, it's the number of plots, 29 plots for caravan camper vans, using that existing building, so converting part of that existing building into shower toilet facilities, a relatively simple one-way system into the site. I'll show you another slide in a moment, just to say this makes it look quite, I suppose, sardine-like. It's actually more spacious than that. The spaces between plots are bigger, and those are very large spots for caravans, camper vans. You can see a little bit of planting proposed. Again, you can see the path to the north edge, well, the top edge of that site there will be retained. A slightly narrower space for it at one point, but it is kept and maintained as a footpath. It's important to the community and will be important for people here. That's just to show a little bit more of the details. So actually the spaces are quite large between those plots, so there's more space than maybe the main site layout implies. I think it's worth showing this, the bollard lighting to comply with the Dark Skies Park, which is very important for around the internal parts of the site. And there's also a condition recommended to have a lighting management plan to cover external lighting from the building and across the site, and including the occupants of the site as well, so that there's some guidelines for them. Very simple. That building remains as it is externally, but then has the change of use within one end for the toilets, showers, etc., laundry facilities. This is the proposed landscaping. There's a 1.8 metre timber fence around the site to provide some screening, a little bit of planting at the Tomintoul end of the site that provides a bit of further screening towards it from those properties and from Conglass Lane, some planting within the site, and then some screen planting to the northeast edge of the site, and a wildflower meadow mix planted there as well. I mean, that screening planting will provide some screening weather and visually from the northeast side, but it's not intended to be a dense woodland by any means. It'll just be effectively a sort of double, triple row of trees just to create that screening. You'll see that there's also a condition looking for some further management of the grassland that heads down towards the bird hide to just ensure that is managed for a species-rich meadow effectively, which will maintain a habitat for wading birds and other species within that area. Just to be clear, up till now, or recently, the community have been doing ad hoc management of that as a wildflower meadow, but this would formalise and tie it to this development. So these are some photos. That's the entrance to the site as it is, the existing building, which will look as it does in future. Obviously, there'll be a little bit of tidying up as the site is created. That's the footpath heading down towards the road to, well, the track down at the Birdhide. And this was, Eleanor explained to me, this was the old route for driving sheep up to the mart. So it's got a good cultural heritage element to it as well. This is a view from the backside of that building looking across the site. So that's that rougher ground that's been previously disturbed. And then you can see the trees along the field boundary to the basically north edge of the site. Again, this is looking towards, you can just see the Birdhide in the distance there. So you can see the rougher ground immediately behind the building, and then the thinner field plot to the right-hand side, and then the more recently planted trees to the far right. And again, that's looking into, so that horse is in part of the site which will have caravans in it. This is looking up from the Birdhide. So that is basically the field boundary on the left is the bit between what is the ground immediately behind the business units and then that thinner field to the left. And the edge of the site is, because of the foreshortening, it's at the top of that rise. It would almost appear to be at the bottom of the building because of the foreshortening in the photo. So the main considerations here are the principle of development, and the site is allocated for a business use within Tom and Towel, and this is a business use, not necessarily entirely the one we would have imagined when it was allocated, but there has been very little take up of that business site in Tom and Towel. The demand seems to be for smaller, cheaper facilities rather than the sort of sites that the Crown Estate had been offering. So it's acceptable in principle, particularly given that it is from the community and is a community development to kind of create more people coming to Tom and Towel and allow for that ability for more business to grow from that as well. In terms of access and servicing, these are relevant points because a lot of objectors have raised these points as well. So in terms of the water supplies, which are one of the key issues, and waste supplies, Scottish Water have no issue with the development at this stage. But as you know, we are not, and Scottish Water very often don't know if a connection will actually be allowed. So I'm not trying to dismiss any of the people who made representations on this, but Scottish Water are satisfied that if they have capacity for connection, both to the water supply and to the wastewater, then this development will be able to be connected. But it's down to Scottish Water at some other stage to make that decision about whether that capacity truly exists. In terms of the roads access, the Moray Council's transport planning team are quite happy that the vehicles will come in on the main street, the A road through Tom and Towel, will turn right at the crossroads and then head down past the fountain in a straight line, more or less, to this site. There are no other footpaths proposed here, but the site is very, very close to the centre of Tom and Towel, obviously, and they are shared spaces in that part of Tom and Towel, so the traffic speeds are low anyway, so Moray Council are satisfied with that. Most traffic speeds are low anyway. Moray Council are satisfied that it's safe. Landscape and dark skies, well, in terms of landscape, it obviously fits into that kind of grid pattern that's established by Tom and Towel anyway. Slowly, there has been development of the rear plots in that planned way. The site has been allocated. It's got that screening to the A939 to that woodland, which is now starting to establish properly. It's not going to be very visible from many other locations. Probably the bigger issue would be the potential impact on dark skies, and clearly they're proposing low lighting which complies with the dark sky status, and we've got that further condition on just to create that management of that. I think we should also bear in mind, though, that it is also located beside Tom and Towel, which will be the main light emitter in that area. So for most people going to watch dark skies, they will not be in Tom and Towel, they'll be going to some of the other viewing points for that. In terms of biodiversity, there are very few impacts from this development. You'll note that the House Martin box, House Martin nest on the existing building, so House Martin boxes are being required to be put onto the building. Potential for some displacement of wading birds, but not very much. And the addition of the certainty of management of the grassland area to the north of the site should help mitigate that. I think it's also worth bearing in mind that the site and the surroundings are used by existing dog walkers in Tom and Towel anyway, so it is subject to a level of disturbance already. But the other part of running a business like this is clearly providing information to the residents, the people who are staying there, about where they can go walking and about what is responsible behaviour. So we'd expect that to be included within the development as well. And finally, and this comes back to that point about this is development effectively for the community, although I appreciate not all the community agree with that, but this is by the Community Development Trust. It will bring in extra spend to the area over time, and will kind of create more business opportunity with Tomintoul too. So we recommend approval.
Thank you, Gavin. Are there any points of clarity for Gavin before we move on to the applicant and agents presentation? I've got Eleanor first, please, then Bill.
Gavin, can you just clarify where the reception point for the camper vans, caravans is going to be?
Yeah, Eleanor, my understanding is that it will be within the front part of the building, and that there'll be a sort of an electronic barrier gate system as well to the rear. But you could also ask the applicant of that.
Thank you. I've got Bill, Derek and Paul, so I'll take Bill first, please. Thanks.
Gavin, to future-proof this development, are there any EV charging points?
Not EV charging points per se. There are obviously the electricity supplies for the hookups, but not EV charging points.
Can I bring in Derek, please? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. In terms of the wading birds, is the site not very close to the bird hide and the viewing for those wading birds? And would there not be an effect on the nesting sites for those wading birds with the close proximity?
Derek, obviously that it sits within that wide area of farmland and wetland towards the Congish Burn. So there are no breeding. There were not any wading birds recorded breeding on the site, though there are in the wider area around it. So yeah, there's the potential for some disturbance, but which obviously the applicant cannot do without committing an offence during bird breeding season. There will be more people on the site. The site's already disturbed, so the birds within that area are used to a level of disturbance from people walking around the site, and with dogs very often off leads in that area as well. So we don't think that the disturbance from this is going to add significantly to the impact on wading birds in that area.
The birds have told you that, have they, Gavin?
By correspondence, Derek.
I have another question, Chair, if that's okay. Are there any other campsites in Tomintoul at present?
Yeah, Derek, no campsites per se, but obviously the bowling club allow people to stop over at their car park and use their facilities in Tomintoul.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Derek. Derek, any other points to come back on there?
Just will it have an effect on that particular business in terms of the bowling club?
Possibly, Derek. It's hard to say. They're obviously similar but different kinds of facilities. So one is a very cheap stopover designed to take people off the road. This one is likely to be more expensive and provides more facilities.
Thanks, Gavin. Eleanor, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, I think just on that point, I don't think we can overlook the bowling club's camper van site. Over the last few years, they've worked really hard at that site and overcome quite a lot of difficulties getting it there. It's been really successful for them. They've been able to keep their club running, replace their carpets, and also importantly, they've been able to distribute money to the wider community. And they are very worried about the effect that this will have. So, just going with the last one, it's really difficult when there's two community groups sort of vying for the same sort of business, you know, and I know you'll tell me it's not a material consideration, but in my mind it is displacement and it does bear some consideration.
Okay, thank you, Eleanor. I'll just bring Paul in, but just before I do, can I just go back to the EV charging points? Is that something that the community might be able to do in the future, and would that involve planning permission or consent?
Yes, certainly it's possible if the electricity supplies are suitable for that, and very often no, it would require planning consent. So,
thank you. Paul.
Great, thank you. Some of the consultees' responses are very short. So, for example, Scottish Water's response is, we have no objection, and I'm not disputing that. But do they see when this application goes in that there are objectors and they have concerns about water supply or disposal? And could they not then put a fuller response to say that the water treatment plant is at 80% capacity, for example, and therefore there is, you know, sufficient accommodation? Are they aware of what representations are made at all?
I don't know, is the answer. Obviously, Scottish Water are a large organisation and a relatively small team that deal with planning applications. I think they don't need to do anything more than they have done. They don't even need to give us a response to this, because ultimately, if we gave consent and there wasn't capacity, then it wouldn't be able to happen until it had identified some alternative water or waste treatment supply. So they don't have an automatic right to connect to that system. So Scottish Water decide that at the point an application to join is made. And sometimes there isn't capacity and people either have to pay a lot of money or have to wait a very long time before they can implement their development.
Yep, Paul?
No, I fully appreciate the point you're saying. I just want to probably flag that would be a concern for the applicant who goes to considerable expense to put forward the application only for it to subsequently and possibly later be refused because a consultee didn't do the work that they perhaps should have.
Potentially, I think if Scottish Water thought that there was a significant constraint that they couldn't address, then they should be raising that on applications to flag that up. So I'm assuming that they don't think that there is a significant enough constraint to prevent it.
I would have to dispute that, because a community meeting in Ollie, who's going to talk in a wee minute, was at that meeting, and the water situation in Tomintoul is absolutely dire. There's people barely getting the 1 bar pressure that Scottish Water legally have to supply them with, and there's quite a lot of the houses at the moment doing testing on a regular basis so they can, you know, have the evidence, but they're saying they're only getting 0.6 of a bar. So I think it's really disingenuous of Scottish Water not to give a fuller response when there are real issues in the village, you know, and the wastewater is also a big issue in Tomintoul.
Yeah, I suppose there's not. I think I agree there, and I can remember people raising concerns about this, and all the time I've worked here as well. And Scottish Water have done work at times to both the sewage works and the water supply, and the issues are still there. That doesn't change the determination of this, though, because your decision today doesn't guarantee them a connection, and it doesn't change their responsibilities for the water supply either, or for the wastewater treatment works.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other hands either virtually or in the room. So I'd now like to invite, we've got Ollie Giles from the Tomintoul and Glenlivet Development Trust, our applicant, and also the agent, Craig Mackay from CM Design. So I think, Ollie, you're going to address the committee So once you've started, you'll have 10 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got a minute left.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be pleased to hear I don't have 42 slides. So the communities of Tom Tower and Glenlivet identified the need for a Taurian-style campsite during the preparation of the Tom Tower and Glenlivet Development Trust Community Plan 2018 to 2022, which was consulted on widely. There are historic plans for a campsite that predate the formation of the trust and possibly predate the formation of the National Park Authority, including a plan on the site under consideration. The trust plans for the campsite follow detailed market analysis and socio-economic impact analysis, showing the site could add £1.1 million worth of visitor spend per annum, and that there is a strong and growing market for camper vans in the national park in our area and in Scotland more widely. In addition to this, there is sufficient camper van market segmentation to support a number of different price points and levels of service, with the site that we propose being at the upper end of the market, with the facilities to justify this. The availability of LSAM waste disposal, which may be made available to non-residents for a fee, will address some of the negative impacts of wild camping in our area. The operation of the campsite will provide an additional income stream for Tom Tower and Glenlivet Development Trust, adding an add to its portfolio of social enterprise projects, which includes the successful Smuggler's Hostel and campsite. The surplus generated at the campsite will directly benefit the communities of Tom Tower and Glenlivet, supporting TGDT's not-for-profit enterprises such as Tom Tower and Glenlivet Discovery Centre, and enabling the Trust to continue and pursue its regeneration agenda. Our experience at Smuggler's Hostel, our experience at Smuggler's Hostel, Tom Tower and Glenlivet Discovery Centre, and from feedback from community meetings, is that the area is yet to return to pre-pandemic visitor levels. However, there is an upward trend in visitors, with visitor service sector economy capacity responding to meet this growing demand. In line with other areas in the Highlands and Islands, there are vacancies in tourism industry which businesses such as ours find it challenging to fill, and it's our intention to offer varied opportunities for direct employment with a dynamic and growing development trust, and provide the economic environment for other local businesses to develop and thrive. Granting permission for this development, which is proposed on a site identified in the LDP for economic development and is adjacent to an underutilised light industrial site, will add significantly to overnight stays in our area without negatively impacting existing established accommodation providers. In addition, it will bring substantial economic benefit to the area and secure the future of our Community Development Trust, which has ambitious developments for future regeneration projects.
Thank you. Committee members, do you have any questions for Ollie? I've got Eleanor.
Yeah, Ollie, can you just confirm that the reception for the camper vans will be at the industrial unit site?
The site will be pre-booked in advance only, and reception will be at the Discovery Centre in the village. So there'll be an intercom system which will connect people to the Discovery Centre during the Discovery Centre opening hours, and out of hours it will connect to a duty manager.
So the intercom is at the site?
Yes.
So there'll be no draw of camper vans to come into the village and round the square by the post office and down by the Discovery Centre?
No, all camper van traffic will be directed directly to the site.
Can I carry on with my other points then? Yeah. Dark Skies, I mean, that was a huge heritage lottery project that's still ongoing and really successful for the area. And a lot of their events are held in Glenlivet, I know, but there are plans for a dark sky viewing area at that lay-by at the end of the left road. So how are the development trusts going to manage the light pollution within the campsite? I take on board the lighting plan and the downward bollard lighting, but the actual camper vans themselves, how do you envisage sort of policing's the wrong word, but sort of managing that?
So the dark sky season in Torrance and Glenlivet runs from the end of October to the end of April, and the operation of the campsite will be summer only. So the campsite will effectively be closed during the dark sky season. The trust is a key stakeholder in the dark sky park, and indeed one of the key volunteers who helped secure dark sky status is on the development trust board, and he's reassured the board and reassured myself that the site will have minimal impact on the dark sky status, because camper van lights emitted directly from camper vans is considered the same as domestic lighting. So the same as somebody having a light on inside, it's the external lighting that's important, and that could be managed with by using the right type of lighting.
That's interesting that you're only going to be open, what was it, April through to October?
That's right, it'll operate the same season the Discovery Centre
I
and the hospitals.
I hadn't picked that up, so that's helpful, thank you. The Scottish Water issue, you were at that Carcton meeting the other night when there was a lot of concerns raised. Have you had any dialogue with Scottish Water about how realistic it is to be able to hook into the system?
No direct correspondence was build a case for upgrade of the water system and upgrade of the energy infrastructure that will allow us to meet those challenges going forward.
Thank you. Can I bring in Derek, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just get the camera going. What discussions have you had with the group at the bowling club, who clearly benefit greatly, and the community have benefited greatly from the camping facilities there? Have you had discussions with them?
Yes, yeah, right from the very start when we were looking at an alternative site at the Lion Infield, we discussed with the chair of the bowling club the opportunity for sharing facilities, and it was actually the chair of the bowling club that brought this site to our attention. So there's potential for ongoing discussions about sharing facilities, Derek.
Thank you. In going back to Eleanor's point, would it not be better, Ollie, to have infrastructure before development rather than after development?
I agree, but I can only speak for the development that we've got. The development that we've got in our portfolio. I don't think it's the trust's responsibility to petition for an upgrade in water or electricity without the projects to justify it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other. Oh, sorry, Paul.
Thank you. It's a little similar to Derek's question. So the Community Action Plan identified a need for additional visitor spaces for camping and caravans. Was there a figure that they put on that, and how much of that figure has been taken up by the bowling club? What capacity or demand is left?
The capacity of the bowling club, I believe, is eight pitches with no L-sound disposal. In terms of the potential capacity, no, no figure was put on that.
Thank you. Committee members, I don't see any other hands either in the room or virtually. I think we need to move on now. Gavin, before we do, can I just ask, is there anything you want to respond to that came up while Ollie was speaking? Okay, thank you. So committee, I'm going to move you now into the discussion. Are there any views or comments that members wish to put forward with regard to this proposal? Lauren.
Yeah, I think just looking at some of the objections, there's obviously a clear, concerns from the bowling club and other members of the community. But what I would say is that if there's anything that has gotten the community up in arms in the last couple of years, it has been camper vans. And I think what has been highlighted quite considerably is that there's no decent facilities for camper vans to park up and access responsibly. So I guess my comments are more around how can we work together, or how can the community work together so the bowling club can succeed. Is there additional funding or help that the park could support for the bowling club to market more effectively, to get the message out there about what kind of facilities they have so that they can increase their capacity? As you can see from their letter, their capacity has dropped quite considerably, or has dropped. And so I think my point is that I just think there's a lack of these facilities in the national park, and we need to be a welcoming place. And I think to encourage spaces for folks to do that responsibly is something that we need to be seen to be supporting, because, like I say, the topic that has gotten the community up in arms in the last couple of years has been camper vans.
Thank you, Lauren. I've got Bill and then Eleanor, so I'll bring Bill in first, please.
I think basically the economic impact of this development will be quite substantial. I think it's a very good thing. I am concerned, however, that in developments like this going forward, we should be looking at EV charging. And I think, bearing in mind there will need to be a very substantial upgrade of power going into the site, because so many vans all connected up in any case. I don't know how much additional load you would require for EV charging, but I think whilst you don't see very many EV cars towing caravans, and you don't see many EV camper vans at the moment, you will in the future. And now's the time to do it, rather than waiting several years and then possibly putting it in. So I think we should add an additional condition that there should be EV charging available on the site. And I don't mean to every individual site, I mean centrally.
I'm just having a think about that because, as you say, there are very few caravan camper vans or even cars capable of towing caravans just now that are electric, and the cost of providing that infrastructure will be very significant. So it might add a fair burden to what is a tight project anyway. And I guess the thing is that once that demand arrives, then the market will want to supply that demand by providing those charging points anyway. So I think we could add the provision of some charging points, but I guess the other part of this which is relevant is that if the capacity of the grid doesn't support this kind of heavy duty charging, then it may not be possible for the applicant.
I'm not asking for each individual pitch to have an EV charging point. I think it's a central charging point for one or two vehicles. And EV vehicles can tow caravans presently.
So I think we could add a condition that requires the applicant to submit details of electric vehicle charging to us, and then see what we get from that.
Okay, thank you. I've got Eleanor next, please.
I just come back on what Lauren was saying, and actually I support what you're saying, Lauren, and I think most of the community in Tomintoul support that view as well. I think this debate should be about getting the best result for the community. It's not about not wanting the facility there, and all credit to the trust. They put in a lot of hard work over the last 10 years of their existence. It's just about making sure that, A, we don't dilute what the Heritage Lottery gave us 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and its continuing legacy, and B, that we don't inconvenience the residents of the village too much. So I'm just looking at ways of trying to make this better, and what Ollie has already told me gives me some comfort in that. But I just wondered, is there any scope for making like or encouraging Moray Council, Gavin, to look at making a 20-plenty sort of zone for traffic around the square? Because I know you said traffic moves slowly, but it doesn't. It doesn't in Tomintoul. Tomintoul is a straight street. They hit it and bang, you know, and they don't go at 30. And I just wondered if there was any way of encouraging a lesser speed for traffic going through.
I mean, I hate to do this, but I might pass on to Derek actually, because Derek is the local member from Moray.
I can come in on that, Gavin, insofar as whilst Highland have done this in the 20s, you know, in Aviemore and places, this is an experiment by Scottish Government. There will be legislation coming or not coming after the consultation period on that. And at present, you know, I've got a number of communities, Eleanor, screaming out for 20s plenty. Some people have put up signs with 20s plenty on them. Those are unofficial signs, but at present we can't legislate in Moray for the 20s plenty. That's what I've been told by our roads department. That I think Borders and Highland region and a number of areas within cities have been designated 20s plenty zones, but it hasn't been widespread. It will have to go back to Holyrood. That's what I'm trying to say, before there's national 20s plenty.
Thank you, Derek.
And of course, if that was the case, there'd be monies available for the signage, for instance. Certainly, Moray can't afford any more signage at the moment.
Thanks, Derek. I'm just going to bring
is that clear enough, folks?
Yeah, I'm just going to bring Bill in with a Highland Council point of view, I think, and then Derek, I'll come back to you for your original question. Thank you.
I don't want to disagree with Derek, other than advise him that maybe Tomintoul wants to move to Highland straight away, make it easier. But certainly, 20s plenty are advisory limits. They are not compulsory, and you, for example, cannot be arrested for exceeding a 20s plenty limit. I believe it's within the power of any local authority to change any speed limit under the Road Traffic Act. But I don't want to get into that.
Okay, just to finish it off, I'll bring in Dan.
As councillor for the area, Bill, I've been told by our roads department that isn't possible. So, you know, I mean, we're talking about two different local authorities. So I've been told by our roads department, because as you know, as I say, my area is blighted with a number of towns and villages where the speed limit's been exceeded, and all the communities are looking for a 20s plenty, and we have been told in no uncertain terms. So, you know, I put that on record by Nicola Moss, who's kind of head of direct services, and by our roads department, that we cannot have 20s plenty, 20 limits in those areas. So, you know, whatever happens in the Highland is up to Highland, Bill, but in Moray, that's what's happening.
Thanks, Derek. Derek, would you like to come in with your original question? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. You know, I agree. I mean, it's one of the things that we were talking about was pinch points where the camper vans were becoming a nuisance, so to speak, and I think this is a good development for that. What my concerns are with the water and the waste You know, was this a desktop consultation in terms of Scottish Water? Do we have to go back to them for more information before we approve this? I'm just asking the question.
Thank you, Derek. Gavin, can you come in on any of that?
Yeah, I think I've already said this. I sympathise with everybody's concern about that, but I don't. We can't compel Scottish Water to give more information, and ultimately they're the ones who are responsible for the connections to the water supply and the wastewater. So it goes beyond the kind of the competence, the ability of this committee to get any further into that, because they're the competent authority there.
I understand that, Gavin, but if you're a resident of Tomintown, you've got a couple of small children, and your water pressure is below the minimum, that doesn't help you.
Thanks, Derek. I think points well made. I'm going to move on to Paul, and then we'll move to determine the application.
Yeah, at risk of possibly repeating Derek, very sympathetic to the point he made, but I do also agree with Lauren. I think the idea of a campsite to attract people, an area where they can pitch responsibly, the economic attraction for doing so is important. But again, I think residents are, in many ways, consultees. They're informing us that there are concerns, and it makes it very difficult, notwithstanding what you said about how we cannot demand that Scottish Water give us more information to reassure us that that this won't impact further. It just doesn't seem logical to want to risk placing further burden on a community unless you really knew that that wasn't the case. So I'm supportive of it, but I'm reluctant and almost at the point where I feel like I've not got satisfactory information to make me want to vote in favour of it. And that's my dilemma at the moment.
Okay, thanks, committee members. So we seem to have a mixed view from committee. We've been asked to approve this application, and we've already discussed asking for submission of details for EV charging points across the kind of site, and agreed that pretty much, if people are happy with that could be asked for. Are there any committee members that wish to put a proposal contrary to the offerer's recommendation, which is to approve this application? Paul, so Paul, based on what, if we just briefly to see if we can get a seconder.
Yes, I think I'm not fully sure precisely of the policy about
okay.
how I would, but it's on the grounds that I don't think that there is sufficient information provided to give me the reassurance that adding this site and the potential burden to the water supply and waste disposal is clear, and that's the struggle for me. Could I support it? I fully understand the point you've made about it wouldn't work if Scottish Water couldn't accommodate it, but then I'm struggling, why should we get to the point of approving it?
Thanks, Paul. Do you want to come in? And then we'll look for a second.
So I think I'm hoping that we can just take that away as a critical concern. So if we put on a condition that requires the applicant to provide us with information that demonstrates there won't be an effect, which clearly will have to be done through consultation with Scottish Water, at a point at which this becomes relevant to them, because at this point they're not going to ask for a connection until they have consent, they have all their funding together, they're ready to ask for that consent. That's the point at which Scottish Water have to do their detailed examination of these issues. Then can we have a condition on which there's no development shall commence until they've supplied that information? Because otherwise I think deferring in this case risks being unreasonable, because this is not within the applicant's control. It's another body who are not doing anything wrong in the information they're giving us because they're following their rules. So, and that, I think that would be the best compromise, which then provides that certainty. All of that will always be in the context that you don't control Scottish Water or their calculations or their works to provide the service that they're required to. But it is, I think that's as much reassurance as you could have.
Paul, are you happy with that condition?
Yes, and just to put that on record, yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Eleanor and Lauren, I think that was also a concern of yourselves. Are you happy with that condition?
I'd be very happy with that because really I don't really want this to be deferred because I know there's a tight time scale that maybe they've missed some of the dates already. I don't know about going for their funding. And I don't really want to put it in jeopardy. As I said it a wee while ago, I just want to ensure we're getting the best development for the community as well as for the trust.
Thank you.
So I'd be happy with that.
Yeah. Lauren?
Again, no additional, just Paul and Eleanor captured that for me, thank you.
Thank you. And Derek, are you happy with that condition?
Yes, I'm happy with that, and I appreciate Paul's contribution, very much so, and Gavin's response. I mean, yes, we have a responsibility for development, we have a responsibility for tourism, but we also, and I'm an elected representative for that area, as is Eleanor, we have a responsibility to the people of Tomintoul in this. And with that in mind, I think we can move forward on this one.
Thank you. So committee, I think we've got somewhere in terms of, I think committee's happy to approve this application. So for the change of use and alteration to form a new campsite, shower facility, hard standing and foul at the Old Mart in Tomintoul, based on the conditions outlined in the paper and the conditions that we've talked about today regarding Scottish Water and getting some information, submission of details of EV charging points for the site. Our committee then happy to approve this application based on those things that we've discussed in our discussion. Great, thank you. Ollie, thank you for coming in and taking the time to address committee.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to move quickly on to AOCB. Before I say anything, Gavin, have you got anything in this AOCB? Okay. So just to publicly say this is my last CMPA Planning Committee meeting. Thank you to committee members and my vice convener for your support and debate, and to all of our officers for their support and guidance throughout my time as Planning Committee convener. I wish you luck in your future deliberations. I'd also like to thank all those who have come before our committee with their applications. I hope in some small way we've been able to help people living and working in the park realise their dream projects, and I'd like to see that continue in the future. So thank you. With that, members, I'd now like to move a motion to move into a confidential session. Are members happy to do so? Great, thank you. James, can we get the live stream switched off? Thank you.